Welcome back to part 2 of this little tutorial where we're using Grid to lay out a web page. In the first episode we set up the basic structure of the page with our header and a side and a main section. And all we've done so far is set up the three. We've got some coloured borders so that we can see where our elements are. Now what we're going to do in this episode is look at how we're going to create this header again using a grid layout. Now there are other ways of doing exactly the same thing. This is a grid tutorial. So here we go. I'm going to start by setting up the logo there on the left hand side. So I'm going to create a div with a class of logo. And inside that, I'm going to place an image. Now, because I don't have a real image, I'm going to use placeholder.com to give me my picture. So I'm just going to copy this bit of text here. I'm going to put that in the source. Don't need all of that. Okay. And we'll put some alt text that just says logo. And we've also got on the other side of our header some navigation items. So I'm going to create a nav section, and I'm simply going to put some dummy links in here. So this is going to be a home nav, this is going to be page 2, and this is going to be page 3. And because we are on the home page, we're going to say that this also has a class of active. And we can style that separate. We can style that differently if we want to go that far. So let's have a look and see what this looks like straight on the page. And you can see it doesn't really look like what we want at all. So we need to set up the header to be its own grid. Let's have a look at what that looks like. I'll just put that over on the side so we can see them side by side. All right. So our header, which is placed in the container grid, is now going to have its own grid. And I'm simply going to have one row and 2 columns. I'm going to divide it in half. It's true that I could have placed this on this grid and this on this grid, but it's more likely one element with other things inside it, so it makes more sense to divide it up like this. My grid template columns, I'm going to have 2, and again they're going to be equal columns. And my grid template row is going to be that. Now, technically, I don't need to put in the grid template rows, but I think it's a good habit to do it all the time. That way, if you do need to come back and make a change to it, you know what you're looking for. It's there where you expect it to be. That's consistent. All right. So now I'm going to target these things inside my header. So a header logo is now there's grid row is 1 and grid column is 1. Now I will point out again, these are the defaults, so maybe don't have to do anything. I do want to make my my image, though, I do want to make that circular. So now my header nav I'm actually going to, it's in grid row 1, of course, because there is only one, and grid column is going to be 2. So that's the start. So let's have a look and see what we've got now. So you can see this is now round and it's over here. And these are now started in the center here. We do want to push these things across to the right hand side. So to pull the nav over to the right, we're going to look at justify self. Now I want to point out in grid that there are two axes, obviously. There's the x-axis and there's the y-axis. This is called the inline axis and this is called the block axis. If I want to align something along the inline axis, I'm going to use justify. Justify, and there's a whole range of different things here, but we can have justify content and justify items if you want to set this up in the grid container. Or, like we're going to do here, you can do justify self for the grid element. So if you want to align things in the vertical axis, the block axis, then you use the align set of tools. And again, there's content, items, and self. So we're moving across the horizontal axis or the inline axis. So we're going to say justify self end. And what that will do when we refresh our screen is push it over to the right. All right, the next thing we want to do is we want to shrink down this and we want to get this lined up in the middle. So again, the navigation, these navigations here, we want to change the alignment of them in the vertical axis. So we'll go back down here and we say align self middle center. And let's have a look at that. And there they are in the center. Let's change the way that these look now. So we can look at our header nav A tags. And first thing we're going to do is get rid of the underlines. So that is text decoration, none. The next thing that we want to do is to increase the font size. So we can go font size, typing, font size, let's go 36 point. Let's have a look and see what that looks like. Not bad, don't mind that. Let's have a bit of padding. Let's say 10 pixels. Yeah, that's not too bad. I might bring the whole thing in off this right edge just a little bit more. In fact, I want to bring both of these things in off, and I actually want to reduce the size of this. So I can do that by adding some padding to the whole header itself. So let's come back up here and go padding. Let's go 10 pixels. Notice, just for organization's sake, that I've included it here, and then I've got my CSS relating to it as a parent grid. I think it's really a good idea to organize your CSS again, so that if you come back to make a change, you've got some kind of organization in your code. All right, so we've just brought everything in a little bit. I'm pretty happy with that. We've still got our navigation. These can click on. If you wanted to, you know, you could put some shading and border around them. Let's have a go at that. Where are we? Okay, so we're back in the A section here. Let's put a background color. We'll choose some kind of gray color, that dark gray, that will do. And I'm also going to set a border radius so I can get those nice rounded edges. Now you can play around with this to find a value that suits you. We'll go back and have a look and see what we've done here. So we've got a background. I'm not particularly fussed about that, so I might increase. Let's go with 25%. Oops. It's still not great, but I'll let you fiddle with that. Now we can increase some margin here, I think, to try and break up these items. And spread them out a little bit. All right, maybe I'll go down to 5%, see what happens with that. Yeah, that's a bit more like what we're going for. All the other elements here, this is just a picture. You could either put an image tag inside this container, or you could use CSS to set it as a background cover. So it takes up the whole screen. You've got a bit more control over that. Here we've just got some header and then two separate paragraphs of text which have been set to justify. All right. The last thing I wanted to show you is a hover effect. So let's say when we hover over our navigation, we actually want it to change color so that we notice that we've hovered over it. Okay, so it's a very simple technique. So our header nav A has a pseudo class called hover. So this says when the A tag is in the hover state. In other words, I've hovered over it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's just start by changing the background color to whatever that is, dark magenta. And let's just see that effect in action. Okay, so you can see straight away, as soon as I hover over the element, okay, it's not just the text, it's the whole element, then I get A, it changes color, and B, you can see that it changes from a pointer to a finger as well. Now, we can do all kinds of things here inside this. We could increase the size. So if we change the padding, for example, to 15 pixels. And let's change the text color as well to, let's go something horrible like light green. That's going to look delightful. And let's see what kind of a mess that's made. So you can see how it sort of pops out a little bit. Now, this is one of the problems, I think, with changing the size of elements. See how it's moving other things on the screen. I don't think that's very good look. So maybe rather than changing the padding, what I might do is change the font size. And let's make it 40 points. And perhaps then, no, it's still changing the size of things. So that's actually something I don't like the look of. Some people don't mind it. I don't like it. The other thing that I'd like to show you, let's just refresh that, is how to make it a bit more a bit of a slower transition. So I'm going to use the transition tag in the root element, and I'm going to say to take 1 second. Okay, now I've done 2 different types of transition here. If I only want the background color to take that time, then I can say background color, take 1 second. So when I come back over here, you should see that the text color changes straight away, but the background color takes that little time to catch up. If I get rid of this, then you can see it happens together. But also see what happened. When the page first loaded, these grew. And that's because I've told it that every transition that this element takes should take 1 second. So again, there's a number of ways of doing this, but perhaps the simplest way is to say that I want the text color to take 1 second, and that's a comma, I want the background color to take 1 second. And you can just put them comma separated list each of those. Okay, so let's go and have a look at that again. So you can see now they both ease in and ease out. Now the transition property has a lot of different tricks that you can do with it, but you can go and play around with that a bit more. And that's all I'm going to do for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.